you're in your late 20s, you finally have some spending money, and you want to buy a dual duty street and track car. Or maybe those snot-nosed kids are finally off to college and you want to get back into a Roadster. Either way, your budget is 30 to 40K US. The car has to be lightweight and it has to have a manual instead of a slush box. So which one is right for you? Let's find out. A few things about this car. It's an ND2 Miata Club, it's bone stock, and it does not have the BBR package. So there are no Brembo brakes, no BBS wheels, and no Recaro seats. The owner, Ashot, has chosen to spec this thing in blue mica, which unfortunately is not Soul Red Crystal Metallic, but we're not gonna hold that against him. And I do have to say, even though this design has been with us for 10 years now, the car looks damn handsome in 2025. And because this is an ND2 Club, the car has the mid-cycle power bump and it has an LSD, but at the same time, it doesn't benefit from the upgrades to the diff and steering that Mazda made with the ND3. Okay, as far as the seating position and ergonomics, at 5'11", I feel a little cramped in here for sure. And the issue's not necessarily with legroom, it's with headroom and torso room. It's not an issue if you're gonna have the top down on track with a roll bar and a helmet, but with the top up like this, it does feel a little claustrophobic. The other issue I have with the cabin is that the cloth seats just are not holding up that well. This car has only 12,000 miles on it, and it doesn't feel like the seats are giving me much support, especially for lumbar support. And there is hardly any bolstering here, which is surprising given how much body roll that the ND2 Miata has. The rest of the ergonomics in here are pretty good. The steering wheel is exactly where I want it to be, the shift knob is exactly where I want it to be, and the throttle and brake are positioned well enough for heel towing, so no complaints there. All right, let's go ahead and start this thing up and hit the road. Okay, I do have to say the steering is a little numb, especially when compared to the hydraulic rack in the 986 Boxster and even the S2000's E-Pass. I'm not getting oodles of feedback, though it is a fairly point and shoot experience. So the car is definitely going where I want it to go. I have to say the pedals feel a little mushy as well. I wonder if there's a little bit of brake fade from the driving we did before filming, but I do think that if they had a firmer feel to them, the car would feel a little more buttoned up and professional overall. The steering feels light, though it does weight up nicely when you lift off or if you get on the brakes and weight shifts to the front of the car and you load up those front tires. And I'm really impressed with the power delivery with the little Miata. Obviously, it's just a small four-banger, but combined with the low curb weight, you really can feel it pull even in the lower rev range, which is, antithetical to the S2000, which iconically has that high revving VTEC and does not come alive until around 6,000 RPM. By comparison, this car has peak torque at around 4,500, which is substantially lower, and you can feel it pull. All right, let's talk about suspension. This car leans like a cholo, which is a little controversial and polarizing. Personally, I prefer the plantedness of my GR86, which feels like it's totally on rails and virtually has no roll. But in defense of the engineers who designed the Miata, body roll does have its place. For example, a lightly sprung, well-damped car like this one does feel more compliant on the road, and I can feel that right now. Number two, it's a better tool for learning weight transfer. Because of the body roll, you could feel which tires are loading up where in which corner. And number three, you really feel like you're driving on the edge more than the other two cars. And even if the limit of grip is not as low as it feels, it just creates a more edgy and joyful driving experience. Even at these relatively manageable speeds, I'm having a ton of fun. It's also totally worth noting that this car has double wishbone front and rear, unlike the 986, which has McPherson strut. So of the three, this and the S2000 are the ones I'd want to mod the most because it's a better platform to build on. And though I'm complaining about the body roll, let's remember that there is a robust aftermarket for these cars. And so you could throw on some coilovers, or you could take the sway bar route and eliminate some of that roll and really dial it in to your preference. Man, this car rotates nicely, and you could steer with the throttle more than you can in the 986. So if I lift off just slightly, the front of the car dips, I get more grip in the front, and I close that turning angle, and then when I'm back on throttle, it carries me back out. What a fun car to drive. All right, let's go ahead and find a turnout here and get back so we can hop into the 986. Okay, next up is the 986 Boxster S. I had a 986 Boxster that I sold earlier this year before my daughter was born. And sitting in here, it honestly feels like I put on an old pair of sneakers. Like, it's so familiar. And immediately, this cabin is so much more spacious than the Miatas. And of course, you're taking a 300-pound weight penalty. But for a bigger guy, I think you'd probably want to get this car if you were both taller and also a little heavier set. This particular car is my brother-in-law's. It's a 2001 986 Boxster S in Biarritz white. He bought it with 10,000 miles on the odometer, which is kind of a bold move, both considering the fact that it's a 20-year-old car and because of the IMS issues, which are overblown, but do tend to afflict cars that have not been driven all that much. Like the Miata, this car is basically bone stock. The only changes are an aftermarket radio and Pilot all-season force. The steering in this car is lovely. It's a hydraulic rack, so it's so much more telepathic than the Miata's was. The Miata felt too light, and it was just sort of numb, so you had no idea what the wheels were doing or where the potholes or imperfections in the road are. Here, you can feel every bump traveling through the steering rack to the wheel into my hands. The 986 does have a more relaxed steering ratio, so it's not quite as nimble and snappy as the Miatas and the S2000s, and you have to give it more wheel into a corner. And normally, I might be concerned about that when it comes to counter steer, but at canyon speeds and the fact that you can't even really get these things to slide, I'm not all that concerned. The pedal inputs are also fantastic. All of the pedals, the throttle, the brake, the clutch, are heavy and responsive. The clutch in particular has a pretty heavy clutch spring. You can probably hear it squeaking every time I'm on and off of it. Yeah, it's a little harder to heel toe in this car, but I'm sure there's some sort of aftermarket mod you can do to make the throttle a little wider and closer to the brake pedal to make that process a little easier. I also think this car is just a little under-braked for its weight and speed, but having had my 986 Boxster and updated rotors and pads, you can do that for relatively cheap. Even power stop rotors and pads are more than enough for this car, especially for canyon driving. This shifter and gearbox feel nice. The throws are way longer than the Miatas. They're also not quite as crisp. Overall, I'd say it's decent, but doesn't really come close to either the Miata or the S2000. And the point of engagement is just so intuitive, and it's easy to drive. It's a very accessible car. You could get into this having never driven one and then feel expert. Which brings me to my next point about this car, the suspension. It is lovely damped. My 986 Boxster had such tired dampers that the ride harshness was unbearable on the freeway, on imperfect roads like this. It was a total pain in my ass. I guess that makes sense for a car that has only 28,000 miles on the odometer despite being 24 years old. And there's nearly zero body roll. It reminds me of my GR86 in that sense. And it feels so clinical and planted. It's doing the Porsche thing, and it's just being excellent. But that comes with some costs, including the fun you can have with the car, right? So the Miata wears clown shoes and it rolls like crazy. This does none of that. But because of that, I feel like a god going into each corner. The car's not upset. The ride is comfortable. There seems to be grip everywhere. No matter how hard I try, I can't induce oversteer, whether that's power oversteer or if it's liftoff or brake induced. It's that mid-engine balance. It does absolutely puzzle me though why Porsche does not add double wishbone to these cars. It's McPherson front and rear, and I don't know if that's because the accounting department was yelling at the engineers, but that's honestly kind of pathetic. On a sports car like this, especially a Porsche, you should be getting double wishbone for that dynamic negative camber into corners. But I guess on the flip side, it's designed to be a very competent street car, not a track car. And frankly, on the street, dynamic camber just doesn't matter as much. And so while this is a very dailyable, comfortable car, especially for the price, if I were to track any of these three, it probably would not be this one. It would be the S2000 and the Miata. I'd add my mods and I'd turn those into a track weapon. All of that said, this car beats the other two when it comes to power delivery. You have a howling flat six that's right behind you. The sounds it makes with the top down in second gear are wonderful. It's got a very livable peak torque at 4,500 RPM. And it's got 70 pound-feet more torque than either the Miata or the S2000. And let me tell you, you feel it out here. It's also got the most horsepower of the three at 250 horsepower. And the curb weight on these is around 2,800 pounds. So it's in the ballpark of the S2000. It just builds power so linearly. Incredible. And last but not least, the S2000. The S2000 definitely feels the most Spartan out of the three in the interior. But that fits and suits sort of the philosophy of this car. It's a no-nonsense analog experience. There are no gimmicks, just a good seating position. the best bolstering of the three, and nice ergonomics from the wheel to the shifter. The cabin is smaller than the 986 and feels a lot closer to the Miata, but it is a tad more spacious. I like it at 5'11". I don't think I would need a bigger car than this. Like the previous two owners, Sean, the owner of this car, has kept this thing stock. He's running Riken Raptors with a stock section width, 205 up front and 225 in the back. So we're not talking oodles of grip, but definitely plenty for this car, especially on the canyons here. With that, let's go and start this thing up and see what it can do. Okay, I mean, you literally cannot beat the steering. It easily has the best steering of the three, even though it's an E-Pass and not a hydraulic rack. That's insane. How is E-Pass from 20 years ago this good, and it sucks now? I don't know what the OEMs are up to, but this is upsetting. It has a quick steering ratio. It's about the same ratio as the Miatas. Even though the 986 has the hydraulic rack, this is my favorite. Man, and the pedal input is otherworldly, okay? The clutch spring on this is so firm that it literally pushes your leg back if you don't put adequate pressure on it. The point of engagement is really interesting on this clutch. It's right at the top, so you're basically right off the clutch pedal when it engages. But I mean, heel towing, easy, perfectly placed. The moment you clutch in, you feel the rear get a little squirrely because you're cutting power, obviously, for that split second. This Honda transmission is easily the best of the three and easily the best gearbox I've ever experienced in my life. What they say about Honda gearboxes is absolutely true. They are not lying to you. This car is an experience. But this is probably the least livable of the three. It is a canyon toy and a track toy if you make the necessary mods. Because this engine does the VTEC thing, and it has two personalities, anything under 6,000 RPM is so boring and dead. You really have to work to make sure you're in the correct band of the rev range, so above 6,000 RPM in the VTEC zone. So the car gives you something. If you've ever struggled to understand the difference between torque and horsepower, I think you should drive this car and the 986 Boxster S, because they have basically the same amount of horsepower. The Boxster S has like 250, this has 249, but this has 70 fewer pound-feet of torque. And for that reason, you're relying on gearing to make power. And you really have to work on this. You really have to just absolutely smash the pedals on this thing to wring it out. Wow. When you get that heel toe right, this car is so rewarding. It feels like you're doing a dance with a dance partner. And once you achieve that synchronicity, the car really rewards you. All of my senses are activated. I'm finding it really hard to talk to camera right now because I'm so focused on driving. The suspension balance is fantastic. It's 50-50. I can steer with throttle. On throttle, shift out. Come off throttle, the front tucks in. You close that steering angle. It doesn't have the Miata body roll. It's just sensations everywhere. I know exactly what this car is doing around every bend. Yep. And if you're not careful with the elevation change, you will feel the rear start to go. For canyon driving, I don't know that you need anything more grippy than the Riken Raptors. This car feels the most alive out of the three, and I think that has to do with the lower level of grip. Double wishbone front and rear. It's set up for excellence.
All three of these cars are a bargain in today's car market. Not only are they decently reliable, they can also be bought in the low to high 20s, leaving you substantial runway for mods, insurance, consumables, and other running costs. That means you can skip the creative accounting when talking to your wife. All of these cars will actually fit within your 30 to 40K budget. Most importantly, these cars are a driver's antidote to the numb, overweight, and over-assisted appliances increasingly lining dealership lots today. And for that reason, you, the enthusiast, could easily fall in love with all three. But assuming you could only have one, let's talk about which of the three is the right option for you. Okay. If you want a platform you can tinker with, but the car has to be a true dual duty track and daily, you should buy the Miata. Not only can you find an ND2 under warranty, you're never going to be in a lurch for parts or a qualified mechanic. Sure, it's a little less dialed in out of the box, but it's the most modern of the three, and it doesn't take too much to transform this thing into an absolute weapon. There's a very good reason why Miata is quote unquote always the answer. If you're not into JDM or you're looking for deep value, the 986 Boxster S is right for you. It's somehow the cheapest of this bunch, all while being the most composed and refined. And don't mistake its leather-clad interior and goofy eyes for softness. It is razor sharp on a twisty road. It won't feel as playful as either the Miata or S2000, especially if you're looking to lose the rear, but it's an excellent, confidence-inspiring car that's approachable for all skill levels. For those of you already loading up the auction websites, here are a few words of advice based on my ownership experience and those around me. First, ignore the IMS fearmongers. Lucky for us, high mileage options are safe and they'll be friendly on your pocket too. Second, the running costs are not as high as some will claim. Yes, there are mechanics who will want to charge you Porsche prices, but parts are generally available and not prohibitively expensive. Handle the labor yourself for simple stuff, and you'll find you may even end up making money on this car in the long term. 3. Updated tires, wheel bearings, and dampers can go a long way when it comes to making these cars fresh. You're really not going to need much else. Last, if this is going to be the third car in your garage, your friends and family have rightly diagnosed your hobby as a mental illness, then you should probably buy the S2000. The AP1 gives you the most unfiltered driving experience of the three, and it demands a tad more skill to tame at the limit. Yes, it's loud. and it's not that comfy, and part support is not ideal, but the S2000 has a certain X factor over the other two, which are already excellent driver's cars. The 9,000 RPM redline combined with the gearbox, the pedals, and steering all coalesce into something special that probably will never be repeated by another OEM, let alone Honda. Of the three, it wowed me the most, though I'm acutely aware that I'd have a slightly more chilled outlook if I had to source a replacement soft top or had to use this car to tackle an hour-long freeway commute every day. However, those willing to live with those compromises should seriously consider buying one. All right, before I sign out, I'd like to make some honorable mentions. The BMW Z3M and the Pontiac Solstice/Saturn Sky Twins. I would love to see how these cars measure up, but I wasn't able to source any of them. If you own one of these cars, you're located in the LA area, and you'd like me to review your car, please email me at gaijintouge@gmail.com. Okay, that wraps it up for this video. Please let me know in the comments which one of the three you're most considering. And as always, I'm Eric Manukian, and thank you so much for watching.